To start with, I'd like to thank Brother Darrell for inviting me to come. And I enjoyed the last couple of times I was here, so I was looking forward to getting back. So thank you. I find things in the newspaper. This isn't the start of my sermon. This is just something that I wanted to share with you from the newspaper. As we draw near to the close of time, nature itself is going to get out of whack. And there's going to be some amazing things happen in the world. So here was one of them that happened. It says, the blast from the recent eruption of the underwater Hunga Tonga volcano produced surging ocean waves, which wasn't a surprise, but the atmospheric waves that shot around the globe in less than 24 hours, including here in the inland northwest, that was a surprise. A natural phenomenon where this volcano erupted from the ocean floor, rose to the surface of the water, and then shot up into the sky. Says the powerful shock wave that rippled through the atmosphere after the volcano's explosive eruption on January 15 in a remote part of the Pacific Ocean was one of the most extraordinary ever detected. How many of you read about it or heard about it? All right, good. I'm in good company here. Barometers at numerous weather stations, including here in Spokane, recorded a rapid fluctuation in air pressure as the massive shock wave radiated outward across the world, traveling nearly as fast as the speed of sound. Now, there was one other thing I wanted to... it says, first and foremost, it was an extremely explosive eruption that created a thick plume of ash, steam, and gas that shot upward to roughly 100,000 feet. 19 miles, 3 times the altitude at which commercial jets fly. That's powerful. It's huge. And then recently on the news, they were talking about a bolt of lightning that extended for 400 miles. East Texas, moved right up through Arkansas and out through that area. It beat the record. There was, I think, in, I'm going to say 60s, but I could be wrong. There was a bolt of lightning that went 400 miles, but not quite as far as this one in, I think, Indonesia. So the world, there's natural events going on just to remind us the times in which we live, things that people hadn't heard about before or experienced or saw. So we are living in a very special time. Well, my wife probably has more credentials to be here than I do. She was raised in Ethiopia, missionary parents, and went to Auburn after going to Spangle for a year, then went to Walla Walla, and that's where I tripped her up and took her to the seminary with me, and she graduated there at Andrews. I got a call from Upper Columbia Conference when I was a senior at Walla Walla, and got into this conference and decided that it had all the challenges and opportunities that I could ever want, so I never left. So I spent my 40 years of ministry in the Upper Columbia Conference. Didn't get on the west side of the conference, Yakima, Wenatchee, didn't get over there. Just kind of stayed here, northern Idaho and Lewiston area, Spokane. Well, if you'll take your Bibles and turn to Hebrews. Hebrews is my favorite book of the New Testament. I like its thoughts. I like its powerful passages. It really speaks to me. And so when I saw that we were spending a whole quarter on the book of Acts, I thought, wonderful, this is great. And so for some of my material that I'm presenting, it's going to be review. They're going to be ho-hum, but maybe there's a point or two that you'll pick up on that you'll find encouraging. And when people who put the New Testament together, I probably would have started with Mark and then Matthew, Luke, and John, but that's not the way they chose. They went Matthew, Mark. That's fine. But after Acts is Romans. Now, how did they put Romans at the end of Acts? They put Romans there because it's the longest of Paul's epistles. And so each epistle after Romans is a little shorter, little shorter, little shorter, and finally you end up with Titus, Philemon. And then you have Hebrews, because they weren't sure of the authorship. Hebrews is the biggest book in the New Testament. They weren't sure of its authorship, but they did believe that it probably came from Paul. And when you read the closing verses where he talks about, I really appreciate Timothy, and he's just been released, and I hope to see him, this sounds a lot like Paul. The rest of the book is a bit unique to Paul's writings. The setting is this. By the way, let's go to Acts. I sent you to Hebrews, but let's go to Acts, the 6th chapter. Acts chapter 6. Verse 1 says, "Now at this time, while the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint arose on the part of the Hellenistic Jews against the native Hebrews, because their widows were being overlooked in the daily serving of food." The word Hebrew for the Jews goes way back into the Old Testament. The Hebrew word is Habiru. Habiru means somebody who's in a foreign land. They're an alien. They have moved into that part of the world out of their native lands, and so they call them Habiru. And that's what the Jews were in Egypt, and that's what they were in Canaan. They were aliens in a foreign land. But it became the name for the people, for the nationality, Hebrews. So here in Acts 6, drop down to verse 7. "And the word of God kept on spreading, and the number of the disciples continued to increase greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests were becoming obedient to the faith." A great many of the priests. That's an interesting thing. The priests, they worked at the temple. They had to do with the ritual washings, and they had to do with the offering of the sacrifices, and they had to do with eating certain portions of flesh. And then, of course, the high priest went into the most holy place once a year. There was just a lot involved in the priesthood, and as they studied it, and they studied the life of Christ, they said, yes, he fulfills the symbolism found in our services, and we are going to follow him. So that's what it says here in Acts chapter 6 and verse 7. Now let's go back to Hebrews again. The problem that arose was that after a number of years went by, the priests began to wonder, why did we leave the temple? Because now what do we have? We have nothing. We meet in homes. That's it. What kind of rituals do we have? Well, communion. I don't know if you want to call baptism a ritual. You might. That's it. We don't have any special clothes to wear. People don't see us as receivers of tithe. That seems to go through the brotherhood here, the disciples. So it just seemed to them that they had walked away from a lot. And now, here was this Christianity that was so simple, so small in numbers, and They just weren't sure that they wanted to stay with Christianity. Well, part of this warning or part of this encouragement to these people who were on the edge and trying to decide if they were going to stay with Christianity or not, or go back to that beautiful temple in Jerusalem. If you go to chapter 3, Hebrews 3 and then verse 6. But Christ was faithful as a son over his house, whose house we are, if we hold fast our confidence and the boast of our hope firm until the end. If we hold fast our confidence to the end. So there were some thinking maybe they wouldn't. Go to verse 12. Take care, brethren, lest there should be in any one of you an evil, unbelieving heart in falling away from the living God. Some were beginning to decide that maybe they didn't really need to follow this Jesus of Nazareth, that God had worked through the temple services and the priesthood for generation after generation. So why would we have to leave all of that? Chapter 4, verse 1, therefore let us fear, lest while a promise remains of entering his rest, any one of you should seem to have come short of it. Let us fear, lest we come short. Chapter 5, I'm just showing you now the need for this epistle, the need for Paul to write this material and share it with these brethren. Chapter 4, 5. Chapter 5, verse 11. Concerning him, we have much to say, and it is hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. They weren't as on fire as they had been. They were thinking that this is, kind of a routine. It's the same thing over and over. And then let's go to chapter 6, and we just read that this morning. These people, he was warning the readers that if you have come to Christ and then you fall away, what are we going to do to be able to win you back? You understood the symbolism. You understood how he fulfilled all of these things. Chapter 8. He continues warning them in chapter 8 and verse 13. When he said a new covenant, he has made the first obsolete, but whatever is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to disappear. So get used to letting go of the past. Let go of those services and the parts that you used to play in them. Well, we're all familiar with chapter 10, verses 23 to 25. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Some were starting to, they quit going to Sabbath school, they quit going to church. As is the custom of some, he wanted them to come back. He wanted them to stay and to grow with the church and to worship God together. All right, chapter 12. Another thing, as you go through the book of Hebrews, he will over and over make a point, and then he'll come around and he'll say, therefore. Make a point, therefore. You find that all the way through the book of Hebrews, using that word. And in chapter 12, it starts with therefore. Since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance, every weight, and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. So at this point, Paul is saying, look at the life of Christ. Look at all the things that he endured, and the troubles and the trials and the suffering that he experienced. Sure, you're suffering, and they were. Can you imagine you're in the priesthood, and then you tell the family, well, you tell your parents, your brothers, sisters, well, I'm not going to go to the temple anymore. I'm going to join this group over here of Christians, followers of Christ. Well, some of those people, they just threw up their hands and they ostracized them and they disinherited them. And so Paul is saying, yeah, you really have suffered. But remember what Christ went through in order to redeem us. So don't give it up. Don't give it up. Hang on to it. He's our example. And then there's another warning here in chapter 13 where there are some individuals who are talking against the church, and the author of Hebrews does not want them to discourage people with the things they were saying. Hebrews 13, verse 9, do not be carried away by varied and strange teachings, for it is good for the heart to be strengthened by grace, not by foods, through which those who were thus occupied were not benefited. And it says here, not by foods. The priests, they ate from the sacrifices. And Paul is saying, don't be carried away by these strange teachings, and don't get carried away by the fact that you're not getting the same things before during the sacrificial service. Well, let's go back now to chapter 1. You have these individuals who were once very important. They played a role in the Jerusalem at the beautiful temple, Herod's temple. And they wore their clothes, the priestly garments, and they were in the holy place, and they had the showbread. And so here these people are getting a little discouraged, and they're thinking, well, I want to go back. Paul is going to use his ace card. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made perfect purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much better than the angels, as he has inherited a more excellent name than they. So why should we stay with this early church? Part of the Hebrew people, it was very easy for them to see God as a bit of a judge. You remember the struggles that Jesus had in his ministry. If you strayed in the least little bit, you were lost. You were in trouble. God hates you. God's going to punish you. If you were sick, it's because God is punishing you because you're a sinner. They had all of these rules and regulations about what God was going to do to you because you strayed off of the straight and narrow path. So what happened was, and we can see some of this in a modern day church that exists in our neighborhoods, where God is someone to be feared, but the mother of Jesus, that's a focus. The mother of Jesus is very loving, very kind, and you can go to her with your prayers because God, he's very severe. Well, this was happening with the Jews way back in Jesus' day. And so they looked around, and not having Mary, they went to angels. The Jews of Jesus' day, they looked at angels as being wonderful ministers of Christ and God, and someone that they could identify with. and angels were with them all the time, and so they began to gravitate toward a fondness of angels. What the author of Hebrews is saying right at the start is that Jesus is better than angels. He's better than angels. Let's go to chapter 3. Remember now, this is Paul's ace card to helping these people stay with the early church. Hebrews, the 3rd chapter. For he has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses by just so much as the builder of the house has more honor than the house. Whoa. I mean, they looked to Abraham as their father, and he's the one that really helped get that whole nation started. And then Moses would be the next big figure. He brought them out of Egypt. And yet, the author of Hebrews is saying, Jesus has more glory than Moses. Whoa, that's saying a lot. Let's go to chapter 7. Chapter 7. We'll look at verse 19 first. For the law made nothing perfect. And on the other hand, there is a bringing in of a better hope through which we draw near to God. He's better than angels. He has more glory than Moses. And it tells us here, he provides a better hope. Jesus provides a better hope. Well, let's go down now to verse 22. So much the more also, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. That was their whole existence, focused on the covenant because it came from Abraham. He had a covenant with God, and God made a covenant with Abraham. And the covenant was that's what made them a nation, made them peculiar people. And Jesus has a better covenant. Whoa. How do you have a better covenant? Because he writes it on their hearts and on their minds. He didn't change the wording of the covenant. He just changed it so that through the death of his son, the law could impact people's thinking and impact people's hearts. It was a better covenant because it was more effective in reaching people. You find that also in chapter 8, verse 6. But now he has obtained a more excellent ministry, more excellent than the priests, by as much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. He has a better priesthood, he has a better covenant, he has better promises. How can you move away from that? Chapter 9, verse 11. But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things to come, he entered through the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation. He didn't go to the temple in Jerusalem. Oh, it was beautiful. It was wonderful. One of the wonders of the world, they say. No, he went to a heavenly tabernacle, which far exceeds anything that we might think about the temple in Jerusalem. More perfect tabernacle, a better tabernacle. Drop down to verse 23. Therefore, it was necessary for the copies of the things in the heavens to be cleansed with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. Well, he's better than angels. He has a better covenant. He has a better priesthood. We'll talk about that. And here he has better sacrifices along with that better covenant. Amazing. And you're considering leaving this. So I would imagine that some of those priests, as they heard this letter read, they began to think, well, what are we left with? We don't have the special role we had, the special clothes, the special times of the year when we let out in rituals and festivals. What are we left with? We're only left with faith. And so the author of Hebrews says, wait a minute, faith, take a look. Look how faith has impacted our history. Look at our heroes of the past and how much their faith meant to our nation and to God and to themselves. And so he begins with chapter 11, moving down through there. But I want to stop with verse 1 just for a side note. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Whoa. I had a teacher one time, and it might have been a pastor, I can't remember for sure, but he said, faith is your title deed to your heavenly home. We can have a title deed, even though, I've heard that this actually happened. A husband went to a town where they were going to move. He picked out the house and he bought it. And he brings the title deed home and shows his wife. She hasn't seen it. But a title deed means that you own it. It's yours. You just need to get there. And so faith is the title deed to your heavenly home. And we need to hang on to it and not let anything take that away from us. So yes, all you're left with is faith, but look at what faith can do, and look what faith can accomplish, and look how it has impacted our history. All right, so he goes down, he lists these people, amazing individuals, and what they did through faith, which is trusting God with their lives. So in chapter 12 now, there's one last thing that he wants to tell them about the blood of Christ. Chapter 12, starting with verse 22. But you have come to Mount Zion and the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to myriads of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of righteous men made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood, which speaks better than the blood of Abel. Better covenant, better than the angels, better promises, better blood than Abel's. Jesus, the author of Hebrews says, should be able to hold you in Christianity so that you don't go back, because he's better in every way than the religious system that you have left. And that system simply pointed to him. Now, I don't know what your Christian experience is, and I don't know if you sometimes are wondering where God is, or why he's not answering a certain prayer. And it may cause you just to step back a little, not to step back purposely, but to drift a little. We need to be reminded that Jesus is better. Better than anything you can set your life goals around. Jesus is better than a full bank account. He's better than a new vehicle. He's better than new clothes. He's better than any addiction that you have ever encountered and participated in, because those things are only working for your destruction. And those images on your late night computer, he's better than those images. I came across a survey in the Review and Herald. How many of you received the Review and Herald? All right. Shame on you, but they did a survey. Who did the survey? The Adventist Archives and Statistics of the General Conference did a survey of Adventist believers. And they asked these believers a question, or to agree with a statement, and it is a statement they start with. I expect the world to end within the next 20 years. %60 said no. They don't believe it. 22% strongly agree, yes, the Lord will come within the next 20 years. 22% of Adventists. I don't know who these 60% are. I haven't bumped into any of them, but I hope you're not discouraged. Here's another one. And they asked 56,000 Adventists, will the second coming be in your lifetime? 44% were not sure. Half the membership, not sure. Christ's going to come in their lifetime. 22%, same 22% that believe that Jesus would come in the next 20 years, they agree that second coming will be in their lifetime. What about the end time prophecies? You still believe them? Well, it says here that 1% don't believe them. This is 54,000 Adventists. 1%, they don't accept it. 3% have major doubts about them. 9% have some questions. Well, there are questions. 21% say they accept it because the church teaches them. That's not the best reason, but it can help you. 66% embrace end-time prophecies as Adventists understand them in the Bible. And then, is the second coming very near? 57,000 Adventists. 22% said, I accept it because the church teaches it. 70% said they embrace it wholeheartedly. So there's kind of a breakdown here, and they actually have an interesting comment regarding this survey. The Inter-American Division has the highest percentage of members who embrace the second coming of Christ as being near in their lifetime, who embrace it wholeheartedly. Inter-American Division. The Northern Asia Pacific Division has the highest percentage of members who are unsure. The Southern Asia Pacific Division, I don't know where this is. I don't know where the Southern Asia Pacific Division is, but it has the highest number of members who don't accept it. That the nearness of Christ's coming will be in their lifetime or in the next 20 years. They don't accept it. Well, they picked up a Pew Research survey and added it to this Adventist survey. And it says, do you believe in the second coming of Christ? Now, there were 2,000 American adults interviewed. 1,700 said they were Christians. 300 of them said they weren't. Do you believe in the second coming of Christ? 80% said yes. Is the time of the second coming revealed in biblical prophecies? A third said yes. 40% said no. 21% said, I don't believe in the second coming. And before the second coming, the world situation will be worsened, 34%, unknowable, 37%, and the 21% who don't believe in the second coming, they held to the 21%. Remember, this is the Pew Research. They're a non-denominational religious research organization. And then the final question they asked to these 2,000 Americans, do you believe that Jesus will return to earth in your lifetime? 20% said yes. 40% said no. And, of course, you still have that 20% who don't believe. All right. So whether we just need to take stock every once in a while. Where are we spiritually? How are we coping with the idea of this long delay Are we tempted to go back? In our Sabbath school class, there was a lady that talked about a friend who had been an Adventist, and now they're in a Sunday church. If we take our eyes off Jesus, and you know the teachings of the Seventh-day Adventist Church give you the clearest view of who Jesus is than any denomination. And if you move away from that, you need to read the book of Hebrews. Because no matter what you left in the past, you don't want to go back, because Jesus is better.